Story number 1.
The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. I woke up feeling oddly shaken, but I chalked it up to the usual stress of work piling up and my restless mind wandering into strange places during sleep. I was 28, living alone in a small apartment in Cleveland, working a mundane job in finance. Nothing out of the ordinary should have disturbed me like that, but the dream was so vivid, so clear, that it stayed with me all day. In the dream, I was walking down a narrow, poorly lit street I'd never seen before. The pavement was cracked, and the streetlights flickered with a sickly yellow glow. I was following a figure, tall and wrapped in a long coat, walking away from me in slow, deliberate steps. The air was cold, and the smell of damp concrete filled my nostrils. I couldn't see the figure's face, but I felt a strange compulsion to follow, like I was being pulled into something I didn't understand. When I woke up, my first thought was to forget it. Dreams are strange, meaningless things, I told myself. But then, as I walked to the coffee shop near my apartment, I took a wrong turn on a whim, and suddenly I was on that very street. The same cracked pavement, the same flickering lights, the same sickly yellow glow. I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart hammered in my chest. The street was deserted except for one person, standing with their back to me, wearing a long coat. I blinked, and they were gone. The next night, the dream returned. This time, I was following the figure into a building, a dilapidated warehouse with broken windows and a sagging roof. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint smell of rust. The figure stopped, turned slowly, and I could finally see their face. It was pale and gaunt, with deep, sunken eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sorrow. The figure spoke, but the voice was a rasp, barely audible. "You shouldn't be here," it said. I woke up with a start, the words echoing in my mind. Over the next week, I kept dreaming the same place, that eerie street and the warehouse at the end of it. Every night, the figure spoke to me, warning me to leave. But I couldn't stop following. Then the dreams started to bleed into my waking life in more disturbing ways. I began noticing strange things when I wasn't dreaming. Cold spots in my apartment, the feeling of being watched, and the faint sound of footsteps behind me when no one was there. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Stress, exhaustion, the monotony of life, they all played tricks on the mind. But then one night, I woke up to the sound of tapping at my window. I live on the third floor of an apartment building, so nothing should have been able to tap on my window. My heart raced as I cautiously approached. Outside, the street was empty. The tapping stopped. The next day, I went back to that street, trying to convince myself it was a coincidence. I walked down the cracked pavement, looking for the warehouse. It was there, just as in my dreams, abandoned and worn down. The door was slightly ajar, as if inviting me inside. I didn't go in. That night, the dreams became more urgent. The figure's voice grew louder, the warnings more desperate. But the message wasn't just to leave. It was something else, something I couldn't understand at first. "You have to remember," it said. I woke up again, sweating and trembling. Over the next few days, fragments of memories started to come back, memories I didn't know I had, childhood moments, long-forgotten faces, and shadows lurking just beyond my vision. I began to realize these weren't just dreams. They were memories buried deep inside me, resurfacing through this strange connection with the figure and the place. One evening, I found an old photo tucked away in a box I'd stored years ago. It was a picture of my family standing in front of an old house, the house I'd never seen before but felt oddly familiar. And behind us, in the shadows, was a figure that looked exactly like the one from my dreams. I couldn't explain it. I researched the address of the house in the photo and discovered it had been demolished decades ago. According to public records, a tragedy had happened there, a fire that took the lives of several people, including a child. That child was me. I had blocked out the entire incident. The dreams were my subconscious trying to make sense of a trauma my mind had erased. But why was the figure warning me? Why was it showing me that warehouse, that street? One night, I dreamed of the warehouse again. This time I entered, and the air was thick with smoke and ash. I saw charred remnants of furniture, twisted metal, and blackened walls. The figure was there, waiting. "You need to finish this," it said. I asked what "this" meant, but the figure didn't answer. Instead, it led me deeper into the building to a hidden room beneath the floorboards. Inside, I found an old box filled with letters and photographs. They were addressed to my parents, written by someone named Sarah, a woman who had lived in the house before the fire. The letters spoke of strange noises, shadows in the night, and a presence that refused to leave. Sarah had begged for help, but no one had listened. I woke up, heart pounding. I knew what I had to do. The next day, I contacted a local historian and told them what I had found. Together, we pieced together the story of the house, Sarah, and the fire. It became clear that Sarah's spirit had been trapped in that place, unable to move on because her warnings were ignored. That night, I returned to the warehouse in my dream one last time. The figure smiled faintly and whispered, "Thank you." I woke up feeling a calm I hadn't known in months. The strange occurrences stopped. The tapping ceased, the cold spots vanished, and the dreams no longer haunted me. I never saw the figure again, but sometimes when I walk down certain streets, I feel a quiet presence beside me. A reminder that some dreams are more than just dreams, and some memories refuse to stay buried. Story the end.
Story number 2.
It started the night my cousin Drew died. We weren't particularly close. We'd grown up in different cities and only saw each other during the occasional family reunion. But the news hit hard. He was young, 32, healthy, or so everyone thought. One night he just went to bed and never woke up. No clear cause of death, no prior illness, just gone. After his funeral, things began to shift. Nothing drastic at first, just small moments, vague feelings, the kind you brush off when grief is fresh. I told myself that I was just processing his death in weird ways. I believed that for a while, until the dreams started. The first dream came a week after the funeral. I remember it vividly, like it happened in waking life. I was in a white room, no doors, no windows, just an infinite stretch of blankness. Drew stood at the center, dressed in the same black suit they buried him in. He didn't say anything, just stared at me. His eyes were cloudy, unfocused, and his mouth opened as if he wanted to speak, but only silence came out. When I woke up, the bed was soaked with sweat. I sat up, heart racing, and immediately grabbed my phone. 3:03 a.m., I couldn't fall back asleep. That might have been it. Just a weird dream born from loss. But the next night, he came back. Same white room, same suit. This time he took a step toward me. His mouth opened again, and this time I heard something, faint like a whisper beneath static. I leaned in, straining to hear, and just before I could make out the words, I was jolted awake by the sound of my bedroom door slamming shut. I lived alone. No pets. No open windows. My apartment was small, just a one-bedroom. I got up and searched every inch of it with a kitchen knife in my hand. Nothing. The door was locked from the inside. No sign of anyone else. But the hallway felt colder than usual, and I noticed a light flickering in the bathroom that had never flickered before. I didn't sleep again that night. Over the next few days, the dreams became more detailed. In one, Drew pointed to something behind me, and I turned to see a mirror where there hadn't been one before. My reflection was gone, replaced by a black void that shimmered like water. I touched it and felt cold seep into my hand before I woke up. I started noticing small, inexplicable things during the day. My phone would randomly vibrate without notifications. I heard knocks at the door only to find no one there. I caught glimpses of movement in mirrors that didn't match my actions. One night, I dreamt I was walking through my apartment, but everything was reversed, like a mirror version of my home. Furniture on the wrong side, pictures flipped. Drew stood in the corner of the living room, pointing again. This time, I followed his gesture and found a small hatch in the floor that didn't exist in reality. When I opened it in the dream, I saw stairs spiraling down into pitch blackness. That's when Drew finally spoke. Don't follow them. No matter what, don't follow them. I jolted awake again. This time I was standing in my hallway in front of the coat closet. The door was open and my hand was on the knob. I don't remember getting out of bed. I don't remember walking there. I slammed the door shut, backed into the living room, and sat on the couch until the sun came up. I knew I should tell someone. Maybe a friend. Maybe a therapist. But I was afraid of sounding crazy. So instead, I started keeping a journal. Every night, I wrote down what happened in my dreams. They became increasingly surreal, but more threatening, more connected to the waking world. I dreamt about my kitchen faucet running black water. The next morning, my kitchen smelled like mold, and the cabinet under the sink was damp, though there was no leak. One dream showed me a photo album I'd never seen before, filled with pictures of Drew and me as kids. In the dream, the last page had a photograph of me lying in bed, eyes open, but clearly dead. The caption read, "He didn't listen." The next morning, my bedside lamp was knocked over, and the photo frame on my dresser was cracked. I started sleeping with the light on. Things escalated when I dreamt of my own apartment again, this time flooded. Water rose up the walls, dark and thick like ink. Floating in it were pieces of paper, each with my handwriting, journal pages from my dream log. One by one, they burst into flame, even while submerged. Drew stood at the top of the water, whispering something I couldn't understand. When I woke up, I ran to check the dream journal. Pages were missing. I thought maybe I'd misplaced them. Maybe I tore them out during sleepwalking. But I never found them. They were just gone. I took time off work, told my boss I had the flu. I stopped leaving the apartment unless absolutely necessary. I was afraid of sleeping, afraid of being awake. My dreams were bleeding into reality. Things I saw while unconscious were shaping my waking world. I didn't know what was real anymore. Then the nightmare came. I was in my bed, unable to move, sleep paralysis, but worse. I felt a weight on my chest, something heavy and ice cold. My room was pitch black, but I could see Drew's face hovering inches from mine, his eyes empty sockets, his mouth stretched open, unnaturally wide. "You opened the door," he hissed, and then I heard it, the sound of creaking hinges behind my bedroom wall, like a hidden compartment was being opened. In the dream, a rotting hand reached out from the wall, followed by a second, and then a face emerged. Not Drew's, something else. Pale, hollow, smiling. I woke up screaming. The apartment reeked of sulfur. My bedroom walls had condensation streaks running down them, like someone had been breathing against them for hours. And in the corner of the room where the wall met the floor, there was a dark stain spreading outward, black, sticky, like old blood. I packed a bag and left. Stayed with my sister for a few days. I didn't tell her why, just said I had plumbing issues. But the dreams followed me there too. They weren't as frequent, but when they came, they were sharper, more visceral. Drew no longer appeared. Instead, I saw that same void-faced thing with the smile. It whispered my name over and over. Each night, it got closer. One evening, I got a call from the building manager at my apartment complex. He wanted to know if I'd recently been in my unit. I said no. He paused, then told me that someone had reported strange noises coming from inside. When he went to check, he found the front door slightly ajar and the hallway light smashed on the ground. I told him I'd be back the next morning, but I didn't go. Not for another week. When I finally returned, it was daylight, and I brought my friend Caleb with me. I told him I'd had break-in issues. I needed someone else there. I was too scared to be alone. The apartment smelled worse than I remembered, like mildew mixed with something metallic. Blood, maybe? Caleb commented on it immediately. We checked every room. Nothing was out of place, except the bathroom mirror. It had a crack through the center that hadn't been there before. I stared at it for a long time. My reflection looked off. The room behind me didn't match the room I stood in. I turned around. Everything looked normal. But in the mirror, the door behind me was slightly open, and something dark moved past it. I turned again. Nothing. Caleb suggested we leave and crash at his place. I agreed. That night, I had the final dream. I was back in that white room. Alone. No Drew, no mirror, just me and the hatch in the floor. This time, I wasn't curious. I was terrified. I turned to run, but the walls closed in, forcing me toward it. I tried to fight it, to stay awake, but the hatch opened. There were stairs again, spiraling into blackness. I screamed for help, and then I heard Drew's voice, faint and panicked. "I told you not to follow them." The thing emerged from the stairwell, crawling on the ceiling. Its face was mine, but stretched and twisted, with wide staring eyes and a jaw unhinged far too low. It spoke in my voice. "You're already here." When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of my apartment. The lights were off. The front door was shut and locked. My bag was missing. My phone was dead. There was something cold in my hand. A torn page from my dream journal with a message scribbled in unfamiliar handwriting. Some doors, once opened, never close. I don't remember how I got there. Caleb said he woke up to find me gone. Thought I left early. I didn't tell him the truth. I moved a week later. Left the city. Got rid of all my journals. I haven't dreamt of Drew again, but every now and then when I wake up in the middle of the night, I hear whispering behind the walls. And I know the thing in my dream wasn't just a dream, because sometimes my reflection still doesn't match me. Story the end.
Story number 3.
I was always a vivid dreamer. Since I was a kid, I'd wake up with these sprawling, intense dreams still fresh in my mind. Strange worlds, unfamiliar faces, odd little stories that made no sense and disappeared by breakfast. But none of them ever followed me into the day. Not really. They'd stay locked behind my eyelids where dreams are supposed to stay. That changed in the summer of 2018. Back then, I was 26, living in a small 2-bedroom rental house in western Massachusetts. The place was tucked behind a gas station and sat right on the edge of some dense woods. I'd moved there after a bad breakup, trying to get some space, some quiet. The house was old, kind of run down, but the rent was cheap, and the landlord left me alone. For a few months, things were peaceful. Then the dreams started shifting. It wasn't immediate. The first one seemed normal enough. I was walking down a hallway that never seemed to end. Just doors on either side, spaced evenly apart, each one exactly the same. Dark wooden doors with brass knobs. I didn't try to open them. I just kept walking. Then I heard this sound behind me. Bare feet slapping on the tile floor, fast and irregular, like someone running with a limp. I turned to look, but no one was there. That was it. I woke up feeling unsettled, but brushed it off. The next night, I had the same dream, same hallway, same doors. Only this time, there was one door slightly ajar. A soft light came from inside. I remember walking toward it, drawn by curiosity. As I pushed the door open, I saw my own bedroom. Same arrangement, same worn comforter, even the little tear in the window screen I'd been meaning to fix. But in the bed was me, lying still, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. I woke up drenched in sweat. My heart was pounding, and for a moment, I didn't know which version of myself I was. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the dark, convinced someone had been watching me while I slept. Things got worse from there. It wasn't just that I was having dreams. I started remembering things that hadn't happened. I'd wake up with details in my mind that didn't belong. One morning I was convinced my bedroom had red curtains. I could see them clearly in my head, feel the weight of the fabric, but they were gray, same as they'd always been. Another time, I found a note on my fridge that I didn't remember writing. It just said, "Don't let him in my handwriting, but I had no memory of leaving it. I lived alone. I told a couple of friends about it, kind of half joking, testing the waters to see if they'd think I was crazy. One of them, Lisa, said maybe I was lucid dreaming or something, that I was probably stressed. I nodded and played along, but something in me knew this wasn't that. About 2 weeks into this, I had a dream that broke something open. I was back in the hallway. The doors were still there, but this time, every one of them was slightly open. Just a crack. And from each room, a low whisper came, all overlapping. I couldn't make out words, just the rhythm of speech. The hallway was darker than before, like the light bulbs above were slowly dying. I walked past door after door until I reached one at the very end. This one was wide open. Inside was a man sitting on a chair facing the corner of the room. He didn't move. He was breathing, slowly, like he was asleep but upright. He wore a gray hoodie and old jeans. I tried to step closer, but the moment I crossed the threshold, he turned just slightly. Not enough to see his face, just his head shifting, acknowledging me. I woke up gasping. When I sat up, I saw muddy footprints on my bedroom floor. I stared at them, frozen. There were 6, maybe 7 smudges leading from the foot of my bed to the window. My window was locked from the inside, and it hadn't rained in days. I scrambled to find my phone and took pictures. I didn't want to doubt myself later. Then I cleaned them up like a coward, like I didn't want to have to explain them to anyone. From then on, every time I dreamed, I woke up with some mark left behind. Once it was a scratch across my wrist, thin and shallow, but unmistakably new. Another time, the fridge door was wide open when I came into the kitchen, and every single item inside had been turned backward, labels facing the wall. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the living room with every light on, holding a baseball bat I'd bought years ago and never used. The dreams got more aggressive, more violent. I stopped being an observer. Something began chasing me. I never saw it clearly. Just a blur, a shape, a voice without a mouth. It would scream from behind walls, whisper from vents, breathe under doors. In one dream, I hid in a closet while it ransacked the room outside. When I woke up, my actual bedroom was a mess. Dresser drawers yanked out, closet door wide open, shoes scattered. I decided to stop sleeping altogether. I went 2.5 days without real rest. Coffee, energy drinks, cold showers. I was twitchy, paranoid, but I felt like I was in control again. Until I nodded off on the couch without meaning to. In that 15-minute nap, the dream came for me harder than ever before. I was in my house, but it wasn't right. Everything was off by a few degrees. Walls too long, ceiling too low. The light had that flickering, underwater quality. I tried to run, but the floor stretched endlessly in front of me. Every door I opened led to another version of the same room. Then, in one of the rooms, I saw him again. The man from the chair. He was standing now, facing me, though I still couldn't see his face. A black smear covered it, like someone had erased it with charcoal. He raised one arm and pointed directly at me. "You brought me back," he said. Not with anger, just certainty. When I snapped awake, I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was in a vice. I coughed and gasped until the pressure finally lifted. I rushed to the bathroom to splash water on my face, and that's when I saw it. A handprint on the mirror, bigger than mine, right in the center. Just one, no smudges around it, no streaks, as if someone had placed it there deliberately and left. I stood there, staring at myself, and I didn't recognize the look in my eyes. I looked exhausted, yes, but there was something else, something lurking just behind my own reflection, a second too slow, a smile that didn't belong. I started researching sleep disorders, night terrors, lucid dreaming, sleep paralysis. I even emailed a couple of dream researchers I found online. One of them actually wrote back. She asked if I'd ever had a traumatic brain injury, if I'd experienced any recent loss. I hadn't. She suggested keeping a dream journal, grounding myself with routines before bed, and avoiding stimulants. It was textbook advice, and I appreciated it. But it didn't help. The thing was already here. It was real. The line between dream and waking life was gone. One morning, I woke up and my bedroom was reversed. Bed on the wrong wall, nightstand on the other side. I thought I was still dreaming, but everything functioned. My phone worked. The door opened into the hallway. But my entire layout was flipped like I was inside the mirror version of my house. I screamed. I ran outside. The world was normal. When I went back in, everything was back to how it was supposed to be. I was losing my mind. A week later, it escalated. I had a friend crash at my place, my old college roommate Eric, just for a weekend. He was passing through and offered to stay the night to catch up. I didn't tell him anything. I wanted normalcy. That night, he slept in the guest room. In the morning, he looked pale and shaken. I asked him what was wrong. He said, "I saw someone in your hallway last night, around 3 a.m., thought it was you. They were standing outside my room, not moving." I didn't tell him that I hadn't gotten out of bed. He left that afternoon and didn't respond to my texts for a week. The breaking point came a few days later. I woke up in my bed and the man from my dreams was sitting in the corner of the room. Not a dream. I was awake. I knew I was awake. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just sat there. I turned on the light. He was gone. But the chair was still warm. I left that house the next day. I moved back in with my parents, something I never thought I'd do again. They didn't ask too many questions and I didn't offer any answers. For a while, things got better. The dreams stopped, the weirdness faded. I slept through the night. Then about 6 months later, I got a letter in the mail, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed my old bedroom. The bed was empty. In the corner of the room, in the same chair I'd left behind, sat the man with the erased face. There was one line written on the back of the photo, "You never woke up." Story the end.
Story number 4.
It started after my mom died. I know how that sounds, like the beginning of some cliche ghost story, but it's true. She passed away in late August after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. It wasn't sudden, and we had time to say goodbye, but that never makes it easier. Grief makes you strange. You see things, feel things you'd never admit to anyone. You start to notice patterns in things that probably mean nothing, and you tell yourself you're fine, but you're not. Not really. I was 27 at the time and had just moved into a new place, a small one-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of town, close enough to work that I could walk. It wasn't much, but it was clean, and the neighbors mostly kept to themselves. I moved in a week after the funeral. Maybe that was too soon. I didn't care. I needed the change. The first time I dreamt of the hallway, I woke up drenched in sweat. It was so vivid. The walls in the dream were peeling, yellowed with age. Fluorescent lights flickered above. The floor was made of some old gray linoleum that stuck faintly to my bare feet when I walked. At the end of the hallway was a wooden door, painted red, and I remember distinctly that it had no handle, just a flat surface flush with the frame. In the dream, I stood still for a while, staring at the door, and the longer I stared, the more I heard it. Not voices. Something worse. Breathing. Slow and shallow. Not mine. Coming from the other side. And it was close. Almost like whatever it was had its mouth pressed against the wood. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. For a while, I chalked it up to stress. Grieving. New apartment. Change in routine. But the dreams came again. Same hallway, same door. Always the same. After about the fourth time, I tried not to go to sleep at all. I'd leave lights on, drink coffee at 11 p.m., scroll endlessly through my phone until my vision blurred, anything to delay closing my eyes. But of course, eventually you crash. And when I did, I found myself back in that hallway. One night, I decided to do something different in the dream. I tried walking past the door, just ignoring it completely and seeing what happened. I turned around to find the hallway extended further than it had before. Way further. I walked for what felt like minutes, the same flickering lights above me, the same linoleum slapping faintly under my feet. But the further I walked, the more I felt like I was being watched. I didn't hear anything, just this crawling sense of eyes on me, like something was pacing me behind the walls. Then I found a second door. It wasn't red. It was metal, dented and rusted around the hinges. But again, no handle. This time, the door was breathing louder. I remember waking up with my heart racing like I'd run a mile. And that time, when I looked around my apartment, something felt off. I don't even know how to describe it. The layout was the same. My phone was where I left it, and the lights were still on. But the shadows in the corners of the room, they didn't move when I did. I know how that sounds, and I know how crazy it is. But I sat there for 10 full minutes watching the corner by the bathroom door, and the darkness in that corner didn't shift with the light. Like it wasn't really a shadow. It was a presence. After that, I started noticing things when I was awake. Subtle at first. The hallway outside my apartment would seem longer when I walked home at night, like it had more doorways than it did in the day. I tested it. I counted them. During the day, 6. At night, 7. One extra door, always near the far end. I tried to open it once, just to see, but when I got there was nothing. Just blank wall. It was like the door vanished as I approached, but if I turned around and looked back from a distance, it was there again. Wooden. Red. No handle. I don't remember going back inside after that. I think I just stood in the hallway for a while, confused, cold, and trying to reason with myself. Eventually, I returned to my apartment, locked the door, and pushed a chair up against it. I didn't sleep that night. It got worse the next week. In the dream, I finally got closer to the red door. I didn't touch it. I never dared. But I stood in front of it, listening. The breathing had changed. It wasn't slow anymore. It was ragged, desperate, hungry. And this time, I could hear nails scratching faintly on the other side. Something wanted out. When I woke up, my bathroom mirror had a crack in it, thin and jagged, running diagonally like a spider web. I never dropped anything. I never touched it. It was fine the night before. But now it was broken. I called my landlord and he said no one had been in. No signs of break-in, nothing unusual. I lied and told him maybe I'd hit it with the door by accident. He shrugged it off. That day, I stayed at work as late as I could. I didn't want to go back to the apartment. I started looking at hotel rooms, even called a friend to see if I could crash on their couch for a while. But something stopped me. I kept telling myself I was being irrational, that this was just grief poisoning my sense of reality, that if I could just get past this dream phase, I'd be fine again. That night, I dreamt of the hallway again. Only this time, I wasn't alone. I don't know how to explain what I saw. It wasn't human. It had a human shape, but the proportions were all wrong. Too tall, arms too long, its skin was gray, sickly, sagging in places like wet cloth. It stood at the far end of the hallway, barely visible under the flickering light, its head tilted to the side as if curious, watching me. I didn't move. I couldn't. And then it opened the red door. The sound, God, the sound of that door opening wasn't wood creaking. It was wet, like flesh tearing. The hallway filled with this horrible stench, like rotting meat and damp earth. And then it stepped through. I woke up gasping. My sheets were soaked with sweat, and my heart felt like it was trying to punch out of my chest. I immediately threw open the curtains, turned on every light in the apartment, and sat in the kitchen until morning. But I swear, for the rest of the night, I could hear slow, dragging footsteps above me. I live on the top floor. A few days later, something happened that made me question everything. I was visiting my sister. She was helping me go through some of Mom's old stuff, photo albums, letters, some of her jewelry. We found a box of notebooks, mostly filled with recipes and grocery lists, but one stuck out. It was leather-bound, and unlike the others, had no label. Inside were pages and pages of handwritten notes. Dreams. My mother's dreams. She'd been recording them for years. Most were short. Some were a little strange but harmless, falling, losing teeth, being back in school. But around 10 pages in, I froze. She described a hallway, peeling wallpaper, flickering lights, a red door with no handle. I read the entire page 3 times. Her dream said, "There is something behind the door. It doesn't speak, but it wants me to let it out. I feel it watching me every night I dream. The hallway always leads back to the same place, the red door. I think if I open it, I won't wake up." I didn't tell my sister. That night I returned to my apartment and sat on the bed staring at the wall for hours. I didn't want to sleep. I knew what would happen if I did. But I couldn't stay awake forever. Eventually I slept, and the hallway welcomed me back. This time it was different. There were pictures on the walls, family photos, ones I hadn't seen in years. My 5th birthday, a camping trip when I was 12. But each photo had been altered. My face was missing. Not scratched out, just gone, like I'd never been there at all. And at the end of the hallway stood my mother. She looked wrong. Her skin was pale and waxy, and her eyes were black pits, like someone had scooped them out. She didn't speak. She just pointed at the red door. I shook my head. I told her no. She didn't stop pointing. Then I felt it again, the breathing behind the door, but now it was louder than ever. It wasn't one breath. It was many, dozens, hundreds, like a crowd pressed up against the other side. I turned and ran. When I woke up, my apartment door was wide open. The chain lock was still engaged, which didn't make sense. But the main door was swung open like something had walked right through it. My hallway light was on, and in the dim yellow glow, I saw something written on the floor in dirt or ash. "Let us in!" I moved out the next day. I didn't care about the lease, the deposit, any of it. I packed a duffel bag, left the rest, and checked into a hotel. I didn't dream that night. I didn't dream for 3 nights. Then it came back, same hallway, same red door. But now I was standing on the other side, and I was looking out through the door. There was a woman standing in front of me, not a stranger. My sister. She looked scared. She didn't say anything, but she backed away slowly, as if she saw me, recognized me, and wanted nothing to do with what I'd become. Behind me, in the dark, the others were breathing, waiting. I haven't slept since. Not really. I take pills now, prescription ones, to suppress REM sleep, but I know it's only temporary. They're patient. They're waiting. And one night, I'll sleep again. When I do, I'm afraid I won't.
Story number 5.
It started with the first dream on a Thursday night, and nothing about it felt like a dream. Not in the blurry, foggy way dreams usually come. It was sharp. Too sharp. The light in it had weight. The air carried the pressure of reality. In it, I was walking down the hallway of my apartment building, barefoot, and every step echoed louder than the last. I could feel the cold floor. I could smell the old dust in the carpet corners. I could even see the flickering bulb above the elevator, the one that maintenance never seemed to fix. It was all so real. Then I reached apartment 306. I don't live there. I live in 309. But in the dream, I reached out and knocked, even though I didn't know anyone who lived there. The door creaked open slowly, and inside was total blackness. It wasn't empty, just pitch black, as if all the light had been sucked out. A figure stood in the doorway. I couldn't see its face, but I remember the feeling. Dread, like my heart was sinking into my stomach. The figure whispered something I couldn't make out, and I woke up gasping, heart racing. It was 3:06 a.m. At the time, I chalked it up to a nightmare. I'd had a stressful week. Deadlines, bills, late-night emails from a boss who never slept. It was probably just my brain decompressing, I told myself. But still, I found myself walking past apartment 306 the next day. I paused outside the door longer than I'd meant to. There was nothing unusual, a scratchy welcome mat, a small plant beside the door that looked half dead, no sounds, no movement. I shook it off, but the dreams kept coming. The next one came Saturday night. Same dream, same hallway. This time I didn't knock. The door opened before I got to it. Same darkness, same whispering figure. Except this time I heard a word, come. I woke up again at exactly 3:06 a.m. This is where I started to get unnerved. There's something different about nightmares that recur exactly the same way. They feel planted, like someone intentionally placed them in your mind. That Monday, I stopped by the front office and asked about the tenant in 306, trying to sound casual. The leasing manager, Terry, gave me a quick glance and said, "No one's lived there for about 6 months. The last guy broke his lease, just disappeared one day, left everything behind. Strange guy." That stuck with me, especially the left everything behind part. I didn't sleep well that night. I tried staying up late, watching stupid comedies until my eyelids gave out. It didn't work. Crashed sometime around 2:30 a.m. and found myself yet again walking the hallway in that same dream. Except this time, something had changed. I could hear footsteps behind me, slow and dragging. I turned around, and there was no one. But I could hear it, like someone was just around the corner, pacing, waiting for me to get closer. The door to 306 opened again, and the figure stood there, closer this time. I could almost make out its face, pale, hollow cheeks. Its mouth moved, but no words came. Then I felt it, something touching my back like cold fingers brushing my spine. I woke up in a cold sweat, drenched. Time, 3:06 a.m. I stopped walking past 306 during the day. I took the long way around just to avoid that stretch of hallway. I felt stupid, but it eased the crawling feeling that had lodged itself in my nerves. But the dreams didn't stop. Every single night, I was drawn back there, and each time the figure got closer. By the 7th night, I wasn't just dreaming it. I was feeling it when I was awake. I came home from work Tuesday and found my apartment door slightly ajar. Nothing was missing, but everything felt wrong. My chairs were off-center. The bathroom light was on when I was sure I turned it off. A glass was on the counter that I didn't remember using. I called the building security, but there was no sign of forced entry. They chalked it up to me forgetting to lock up. That night, I set up my phone to record audio while I slept. I didn't want to admit it, but I needed proof. Something to tell me if this was all in my head or not. When I checked the recording the next morning, most of it was silence with occasional tossing sounds, but at exactly 3:06 a.m. I heard something. Footsteps. 3 slow steps. Then the unmistakable sound of my bedroom door creaking open. I never sleep with it closed. And then a voice, whispering, distorted like it was underwater. It said one word, stay. I didn't go to work that day. I sat in my apartment with every light on, curtains open, doors locked, and my back against the wall. I kept staring at the hallway, half expecting to see someone or something step into view. I brought the recording to my friend Jonah, who works in audio production. I didn't tell him where it was from, just asked him to clean it up and isolate any intelligible words. He called me later that night, his voice low and tense. "Man, what did you record?" I asked what he meant. I cleaned it up. At 3:06, there's a really clear voice, not just stay. Before that, it says, "You're already here," like twice, then stay. Creepy as hell. That was the first time I actually felt afraid of sleeping. Not just dread, actual fear. Like if I fell asleep, I wouldn't wake up. Or worse, I'd wake up somewhere else entirely. That night, I tried staying up with caffeine and TV again, but my body gave out around 2:40 a.m., and like clockwork, I was back in the dream. This time, though, it wasn't just the hallway. It was my apartment. I stood in my living room, but everything was slightly off. The windows were bricked over. The lights flickered as if underwater. I walked to my bedroom, and the door was open. The figure stood inside. I could see its face now. It was me, a distorted, decaying version of myself. Same clothes, same build, same eyes, but something dead behind them. It raised a hand and pointed toward the window. I looked. Through the bricks, I could see apartment 306. The door wide open. Something moved inside. I woke up gasping. I didn't even check the time. I already knew. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. I couldn't keep living in fear of a dream that was now bleeding into my waking life. That evening, I waited until everyone in the hall had gone quiet and walked to 306. I stood in front of it, hand trembling as I reached for the knob. I didn't knock. The door wasn't locked. It creaked open with a long groan, just like in the dreams. The air inside was thick and cold, like stepping into a freezer. The lights didn't work. I used my phone's flashlight to scan the room. Everything was coated in dust. Furniture still there. Old couch, coffee table, a rotting bookshelf. It looked like someone had left in a hurry. Papers scattered, a mug still sitting on the floor. I stepped in slowly, moving toward the bedroom. Then I saw the drawings. On the wall of the hallway were hundreds of pages, taped or pinned up. Scribbles. Charcoal drawings of the same hallway, over and over, the same door, the same figure. Some had phrases scrawled on them. Don't follow it. You're dreaming. Don't sleep. One, near the bottom, had a date on it. March 6th, 306. The last tenant must have been dreaming it too. That's when I heard something in the room behind me. A shuffle, a footstep. I turned around, and the door to the unit slammed shut on its own. The light from my phone flickered. I backed away, heart pounding. Then something whispered behind me, right next to my ear. You came. I ran. I don't remember running back to my unit. I just remember locking the door behind me and collapsing on the floor, chest heaving. I barely slept that night. When I did, I dreamed of nothing but darkness. The next morning, I went back to the front office and asked again about the last tenant. This time, I pressed Terry harder. She looked around and said, Look, between you and me, he went kind of crazy. He started calling the office every morning saying he couldn't sleep, that he was being haunted through his dreams. Said there was another version of himself that lived in the building and was trying to take his place. One day, he just vanished. No one ever saw him leave. We eventually had to declare the unit abandoned. I asked her if anyone else had complained. She hesitated. There was a woman in 304 who moved out last year. Same kind of thing. Said she kept dreaming of a door that wouldn't let her wake up. We thought she was on something. She left in the middle of the night. I moved out that same week. I haven't had the dream since I left the building. But sometimes at night, I wake up at exactly 3-6 a.m. with no explanation. I sit in bed, waiting, listening, hoping I don't hear a whisper, hoping I don't see my bedroom door creak open. Because the dreams may have stopped, but I'm not sure whatever it was ever needed dreams in the first place. Story the end.
Story number 6.
It was sometime around the fall of 2017 when I first started having the dreams. At the time, I was a graduate student in Boston, living in a small third-floor apartment near Jamaica Plain. The place wasn't much. Thin walls, uneven floors, and a leaky radiator that kept the rooms either freezing or boiling, but it was cheap, and that was enough. I had always been prone to vivid dreams. Growing up, I'd have full, immersive nightmares that often jolted me out of sleep in a cold sweat. But those dreams faded as I got older, and by the time I was 25, they were rare. That's why it struck me as odd when they started returning, only now they were more than vivid. They were detailed. I remembered every moment, the texture of skin, the shape of a doorknob, the exact pitch of someone's voice. The first one that mattered happened in early October. In the dream, I was walking down a street I didn't recognize. It was dusk. The houses looked old, their front porches sagging, some windows boarded up. There was a mailbox with a red flag raised, and I remember the name on it, Garson. I walked past it and turned down an alley between two buildings. At the end was a small fenced yard, and in the yard was a man crouched down, digging. He looked up at me. His face was hollow, like he hadn't eaten in weeks. His eyes were wide and full of something I couldn't describe, fear or desperation or maybe just madness. He raised one hand, fingers covered in dirt, and mouthed something I couldn't hear. I woke up right then, heart racing, soaked in sweat. I didn't think much of it that morning. I even laughed to myself about it while brushing my teeth. But later that afternoon, on my way to class, something caught my eye. A street sign. Garson Aviv. I stopped mid-step and just stared at it. I had never noticed the street before. I didn't know if it had always been there, or if I'd just been blind to it. Curiosity tugged at me, and I turned down it. The houses looked familiar, too familiar. The same peeling paint, the same cracked sidewalks, even the mailbox stood right there with the red flag up. Garson, it said. I kept walking. At the end of the block was an alley. I hesitated for only a second before going down it. It ended just like in my dream, a fenced yard, mostly dirt and weeds. There was no one there, but a patch of ground had clearly been disturbed, soil dark and loose like someone had just finished digging. I stood there for a long time, goosebumps crawling up my arms. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. I didn't tell anyone. What could I say? That I had a dream about a place I'd never seen and then found it in real life? People would laugh, or worse, they'd start watching me like I was sick. But the dreams kept coming. The next one came 2 nights later. I was sitting in a diner, red leather booths, greasy smell in the air. A waitress walked up to me with a plate of fries and said, "Don't look at the window." Of course I looked. Outside was a man standing still under the streetlight. He wore a black jacket and a red knit hat. His face was hidden in shadow, but he was staring straight at me. I couldn't see his eyes, but I knew he could see mine. The next morning, I was on the Orange Line headed to South Station when I saw the diner. I'd never noticed it before, even though I must have walked past it dozens of times. Same red booths, same metal-framed windows. I froze when I looked inside. A man stood on the sidewalk across the street, right under a flickering streetlight, wearing a red knit hat. He didn't look at me. He was smoking, his head tilted down, but my whole body went cold. I got off at the next stop and threw up in a trash bin. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. The line between dream and reality blurred further, like the wall was thinning. Sometimes I'd wake up with bruises, cuts, or mud under my nails. Other times, I'd dream of someone speaking to me, usually that same man from the yard, only to hear the exact same words on TV the next day or from someone on the street. Once a friend said something in conversation, and I finished her sentence before realizing she hadn't said it yet. I just dreamed she would. Sleep became something I feared. I tried staying up for days, taking pills, even alcohol. Nothing worked. I always fell back into the same heavy, oppressive sleep, and the dreams started to bleed into waking life. It wasn't just places I was seeing now. It was people, events, deaths. I dreamed of a girl sitting on the tee, blood leaking from her mouth while everyone else ignored her. The next day I read a headline, "Woman dies from internal bleeding on MBTA train. No one notices until final stop." I dreamed of a house fire on Parker Street, an old woman screaming from the second floor window. 2 nights later, a fire broke out there. I watched the smoke from my apartment window. I started tracking them, writing down every detail from every dream in a notebook, matching them against the news, police blotters, Reddit posts. Most didn't make headlines, but some did. And every time the dreams came first, I was seeing them, predicting them. I thought maybe I could stop it. The first time I tried was with a man named David Keller. I had dreamed of him falling down an escalator, cracking his head on the bottom tile. I saw the name tag on his shirt in the dream. He worked at a tech firm called Wildacom. I tracked him down, pretending to be a job recruiter. I met him at a coffee shop, heart pounding. I tried to warn him casually, telling him to be careful, maybe avoid the mall for a few days. He laughed. He told me he hadn't been to the mall in months. The next day, he fell down an escalator at Copley Place. Skull fracture, died in the hospital. I spiraled after that. If I couldn't stop them, what was the point? My grades tanked. I stopped seeing friends. My world narrowed to my dreams and what they were telling me. The man from the first dream, the one digging, started appearing more and more. Sometimes he just stared. Sometimes he spoke. He called me by name. He said things like, "You're getting close," or "They won't let you wake up next time." I asked him once who they were, and he said, "The ones beneath." I dreamed once that I was in my own apartment, but it was empty. No furniture, no books, nothing. Just shadows crawling along the ceiling like spilled ink. The door wouldn't open, and I couldn't scream. I just stood there watching them gather. When I woke up, the bruise was on my arm, a large, dark handprint. I didn't tell anyone. The worst dream came in January. I was standing in a funeral home. The air was cold and still. I walked past rows of people in black, and when I looked in the casket, it was me. My own dead face, pale and sunken. My mouth moved, just a twitch, and my eyes opened. I gasped and woke up in bed, drenched in sweat, lungs heaving. I didn't leave the apartment for 2 days after that. When I finally did, it was to visit a professor, Dr. Reardon, someone I trusted. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. That I'd been having dreams that came true and that I was worried about my health, maybe mentally. He listened kindly and offered to help me find a sleep clinic. I never made it to the appointment. That night, I dreamed of Reardon in his office. The window behind him smashed, a figure stepping through. I tried calling him the next morning, but he didn't answer. I went to his office. Yellow police tape blocked the door. He'd died the night before. Broken neck. Authorities said he fell from his chair and hit the corner of the desk. But the window, there was a tarp over it. Broken. After that, I stopped trying to help people. I stopped trying to understand. I just recorded, wrote down what I saw, tracked it, confirmed it, like I was some kind of witness to a puzzle no one else could see. The man in the yard came more often, and now I knew his name, Daniel. One night I asked him directly, "Why are you showing me this?" He looked at me with that same hollow stare and said, "Because it's your turn next." "What does that mean?" I asked. "They always choose one," he whispered. "To keep the balance." I begged him to explain, but he only repeated it. "To keep the balance." That was the night I stopped sleeping. But of course that couldn't last. 2 weeks later, I collapsed on the sidewalk from exhaustion and woke up in the hospital. While I was unconscious, I dreamed again. Only this time it wasn't a place I'd seen before. It was a white hallway, endless, sterile, lit by flickering fluorescent lights. Every door I passed was marked with a single number. Mine said 238. I opened it. Inside was a room with no windows, no furniture, no color, just a chair. And sitting in the chair was Daniel, but it wasn't him anymore. It was me. His face was gone, replaced by mine, except the eyes. His eyes were still his. "You'll understand soon," he said in my voice, "when they come for you." I woke up screaming. The nurse gave me sedatives. They thought I was psychotic. Maybe I was. But here's the thing. The dreams stopped after that. No more visions. No more Daniel. No more waking up with dirt under my nails or bruises that didn't make sense. The silence should have brought relief. But instead, I felt like I was in the eye of a storm. Like something had moved past me and was waiting, just out of sight. I moved cities after that, dropped out of grad school, tried to rebuild my life, found a new job, a new apartment, new friends. I almost convinced myself it was over, just a long, strange chapter in my life. Maybe a breakdown, maybe something worse. But last week I had a dream. I was walking down a familiar street. A mailbox stood on the left. Garson. The yard at the end of the alley was empty now, but I knew what lay beneath the soil. I stood there, staring, and I felt a presence behind me. When I turned, there were shadows gathering, crawling along the fences, whispering. Daniel was there. But now he looked like someone else, someone I didn't recognize, and he smiled. "It's your turn," he said again. I woke up and checked the calendar. It was exactly 7 years since the first dream. I found the old notebook and flipped through the pages, heart hammering. Every 7 years, one chosen. To see, to record, to carry the dreams. I don't know what's coming next, but I haven't slept in 4 days, and I'm terrified of what I'll see when I do. Story the end.
Story number 7.
I've had odd dreams all my life. Not the kind you talk about at breakfast and forget before your second cup of coffee, but the ones that drag you out of bed in a sweat and sit heavy on your chest all day. They've always been too detailed, too lifelike, too real, and sometimes, just sometimes, they've matched up with real life in ways that made my skin crawl. But nothing, not even the worst of them, prepared me for what happened last year. It started in December. I had just moved into a new apartment in a smaller city outside Boston. It was an older place, a 3-story walk-up with creaky wooden floors and a view of a narrow alley below. The kind of place you tell yourself has character because the rent is manageable and the heating actually works. My job had relocated me there, and I didn't know anyone. I spent most nights alone, watching TV with the sound low or reading in bed. The first dream came about a week after I moved in. In it, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. It looked exactly like my bedroom, the same cracked molding, the same streetlight casting a slanted orange glow through the blinds. I remember hearing breathing, not my own, heavy, ragged breathing, as if someone was sitting in the dark corner of the room. My eyes snapped toward the far end where the wall met the dresser. At first, I saw nothing, but then something shifted. A figure. Sitting in the corner, its knees tucked up, its face buried in its arms. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was watching me, and I knew it was angry. I woke up gasping, my sheets damp from sweat. I turned on every light in the apartment and searched every corner, but there was nothing. Just silence and dust and shadows. I wrote it off as moving stress. New place, new job, no friends. My brain was acting out. I didn't sleep much that night. The next night, the dream returned. This time, I was frozen in bed. Couldn't move a muscle. The thing in the corner hadn't moved either, but I could hear it whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but it was fast, almost frantic, like someone mumbling to themselves. The same position, knees tucked, face down, but I could feel its eyes through its hair, staring at me like it wanted me to leave. I screamed in the dream. Tried to move, to run. Nothing. I woke up again, and this time I found scratches down my right arm. 4 lines, like fingernail scratches, just deep enough to sting. I don't sleepwalk. I've never self-harmed. There was no explanation. I tried to calm myself, told myself I'd scratched it in my sleep. Maybe I brushed up against something sharp. I didn't even own pets. I went to work with long sleeves and kept my mouth shut. The dreams continued every night after that, each one a little different. In one, I was sitting on the couch and it walked across the hallway behind me, just outside the door to the bedroom. In another, I was brushing my teeth and saw it standing in the mirror, unmoving, but closer. Always silent, except for that whispering. Sometimes I could feel its breath on my neck. Other times I could hear it crying, very softly, like a child trying not to be noticed. One night, I dreamed I was standing outside my own bedroom door. It was closed, but the knob was turning, slowly. I couldn't move again, just watching it twist back and forth, that like someone testing to see if I was awake. Then it stopped. I heard my own voice whisper, "Don't open it." And then the dream ended. I started leaving lights on. I bought sage and burned it. Not that I knew how to use it. I even looked up local priests, just in case. But I didn't call. I didn't want to sound crazy. Then something happened that made me question whether this was all just in my head. I came home from work one night to find the door to my apartment wide open. Not cracked, not unlocked, wide open. Nothing inside was taken, nothing broken, but the smell was wrong, like wet dirt and something metallic. I checked the windows. All locked. I changed the deadbolt the next morning. A few nights later, I woke up around 3 a.m. and heard a soft shuffling coming from the living room. Not footsteps, more like something dragging across the floor. I was too scared to move. I just lay there, eyes wide, heart racing, straining to hear. Then I heard my own voice again, like in the dream, "Don't open it." I stayed in bed until the sun came up. The next day, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On the wall across from my bed, just behind where the figure always sat in my dreams, there were faint smudge marks, long vertical streaks, like something greasy had been dragged down the paint. 4 lines, just like the scratches on my arm. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was old residue. Maybe someone before me had furniture there, but it looked too fresh. I took pictures. I didn't know why, maybe proof for myself. Then came the dream that changed everything. In it, I was dreaming that I had finally fallen asleep, like a dream within a dream. I was peaceful, no figure, no whispering, just quiet. Then the bed began to shake, lightly at first like a tremor, then violently like something was underneath, pounding upward. I rolled off the mattress and hit the floor. When I looked up, I saw the figure crawling out from under the bed, slowly dragging itself forward. Its limbs were too long, its movements jerky, and for the first time I saw its face. It was mine, but wrong. The skin was pale, sagging. The eyes were black holes, mouth too wide, stretched into a grotesque grin that didn't move. And it whispered in my voice, "Let me in." I woke up screaming, heart pounding so hard I thought I was going to pass out. My phone said 3:33 a.m. I turned on all the lights. I didn't go back to bed. I couldn't stay there anymore. I called my boss and lied, said there was a family emergency. I booked a hotel for a few nights and packed what I could. As I left, I glanced at the bedroom one last time. The greasy marks on the wall were darker, longer, like someone had been dragging their hands down it night after night. I thought the dreams would stop at the hotel. I was wrong. That first night, I dreamed I was back in my apartment, but it was empty. No furniture, no lights, just bare walls and dust. The figure was standing in the center of the room, facing away from me. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was waiting. Then it whispered, louder than ever before, "I found you." I woke up in the hotel bed with blood on my pillow. My nose had bled sometime during the night, something that hadn't happened to me in years. My heart wouldn't slow down. I sat in the bathroom for 2 hours, lights on, door locked, watching the door like it might open on its own. I reached out to the landlord and begged to break my lease. He didn't argue, just said, "You're not the first." That was all he said. When I asked him what he meant, he told me I should talk to the woman who lived there before me, if I could find her. Said she left in a hurry, mid-lease, stopped paying rent, didn't answer his calls. I spent days trying to track her down. Nothing. Her phone was disconnected, no social media, no forwarding address. I found an old listing with her name and a reference number. I called it. It went straight to voicemail. Just static, followed by a click. I never slept in that apartment again. I hired a moving company and sent someone else to grab my things. I moved back closer to family, told everyone the job didn't work out. They didn't ask too many questions. I looked like hell by then. But the dreams didn't stop. They changed. Now the figure isn't just in the apartment. It shows up in other places. My childhood bedroom, my parents' living room, the office where I work now. Always sitting, always waiting. Sometimes I catch it out of the corner of my eye, just for a second. I try to blink it away, but the feeling lingers. That oppressive silence, that rage. And always, always, that whisper, "Let me in." I started seeing a therapist. I didn't tell her everything, just that I was having recurring nightmares. She prescribed sleep aids. They helped me fall asleep, but not with what happens after. I tried lucid dreaming techniques, hoping I could confront it, change the outcome. Every time I try, the dreams shift. It's like it knows what I'm doing, like it's aware. 3 nights ago, I woke up to find muddy footprints on my bedroom floor, leading from the window to the side of my bed. The window was locked from the inside. I live on the 5th floor. Last night, I dreamed I was back in the hotel, the one I stayed at after fleeing the apartment. The hallway was empty. The lights were flickering. I walked to the room I had stayed in and opened the door. Inside, there was nothing but the bed, and on it, the figure, curled up under the blankets, whispering. I stepped forward, and it sat up suddenly, facing me. It was still wearing my face, and it smiled. Then it said, "I'm already here." I woke up in my own bed, standing over it, just staring down at the sheets. I don't remember getting up. My mouth was dry, my eyes burned, and on the floor next to the bed was a single, dark handprint, as if something had climbed out from underneath. I haven't slept since. I'm afraid to close my eyes, because what if I don't dream anymore? What if I'm already dreaming, and it's the waking world that's been swallowed? Story, the end.
Story number 8.
It all started the night I moved into my new apartment. I was excited but exhausted after a long day of unpacking and setting things up. As I lay down to sleep, I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. I was just eager to get some rest before my first day at the new job. But that night, my dreams took a dark turn, and they never really stopped. In the dream, I was standing in my living room. Everything looked the same, but there was a heavy silence, like the world had been drained of all sound. The lights flickered faintly overhead. I glanced out the window, and the street outside was empty, bathed in a pale, bluish light like twilight, except it was dead quiet. No traffic, no distant voices. Then, suddenly, I heard a knock at the front door. Slow, deliberate. The kind of knock that feels like it's more than just someone wanting to come in, like a warning. I walked over and looked through the peephole, but no one was there. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty too, except for a small folded piece of paper lying just inside. I picked it up and unfolded it. The words were written in messy, hurried handwriting. "Don't ignore the dreams." I woke up in a cold sweat. It felt so real. The weight of that paper in my hand, the quiet hallway. I tried to shake it off as just a weird nightmare, but I couldn't stop thinking about those words. Over the next few nights, the dreams kept coming back, each one more vivid than the last. The scenes always started in my apartment, always at night, always with that same eerie silence. The knocking would return, always more urgent. Sometimes when I looked through the peephole, I'd see a shadowy figure standing in the hallway. Tall, indistinct, no clear features, just a silhouette that seemed to shift and blur, as if it wasn't quite part of this world. The message changed too. Sometimes the notes left at the door were different. You're not safe. They're watching. Remember. Each morning, I woke feeling more drained, more anxious. I started noticing small changes in the apartment. My belongings would be slightly out of place. The coffee maker would be on, even though I hadn't touched it. A faint scent of something metallic lingered in the air, like blood or rust. I told myself it was stress or fatigue, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. One night, the dream shifted. Instead of just knocking at the door, the figure stepped inside. The lights dimmed even further until the room was almost completely dark. I could feel its presence standing right behind me, cold and heavy. Then it whispered, low and raspy, "Find the truth before it finds you." I woke up gasping, clutching the sheets. My heart hammered in my chest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I began to research the history of the building. It was old, built in the 1920s, with a complicated past. Over the years, there had been a series of unexplained disappearances and strange deaths, many never fully investigated. Tenants had reported hearing footsteps in empty hallways, doors slamming shut on their own, and strange figures glimpsed from the corner of their eyes. One name kept coming up: Eleanor Blackwood. She was a woman who had lived in the building during the 1930s. According to local archives, Eleanor had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a scandal and rumors of dark rituals. Some believed she was a witch. Others said she was a victim of foul play. I didn't believe in any of it, but the dreams and the notes seemed to be connected to her somehow. A week later, the dreams became unbearable. I found myself waking at exactly 3:15 a.m. every night. I'd hear that knocking, then the figure appearing at the door, always whispering that cryptic warning. The notes were appearing in my apartment, not just in the dream. One morning, I found one folded neatly on my pillow. It said, "Eleanor's truth lies beneath." I was terrified, but also strangely compelled to find out what it meant. I decided to explore the basement of the building. It was locked, but with some effort, I managed to get in through a service entrance. The basement was dank and cold, filled with old pipes and stacks of dusty crates. I found a locked door at the far end, old and rusted. When I forced it open, I stepped into a small room lined with shelves filled with papers, photographs, and strange artifacts. Among the clutter, I found a leather-bound journal. The cover was cracked and worn, but the name inside was clear: Eleanor Blackwood. I began to read. The journal detailed Eleanor's descent into obsession with the supernatural. She had been trying to communicate with the dead, believing that the building was a gateway between worlds. The entries grew darker, describing shadowy figures that visited her, voices whispering warnings she couldn't understand, and rituals she hoped would protect her from the Watchers. The last entry was chilling. Eleanor wrote that she had made a deal to keep the darkness at bay, but the price was steep. She warned that anyone who discovered her secrets would be marked. Suddenly, I felt a cold breeze brush past me, even though there were no windows or vents in the room. The temperature dropped sharply. I heard the faint tapping of fingers against the wall, the same tapping from my dreams. Panicked, I closed the journal and hurried back upstairs, heart pounding. That night, the dreams changed again. I was no longer just an observer. I was being pulled into the shadowy world Eleanor had described. I stood on the threshold between my apartment and the shadow realm, a twisted mirror of my own home, dark and distorted. The figure was waiting, its eyes glowing faintly. It reached out a hand, and I felt an icy grip on my wrist. It whispered, "Finish what she started." I woke up shaking, unable to move. The next days were a blur. I found myself compelled to learn more about Eleanor, about her rituals, about the Watchers she feared. I sought out historians, occult experts, anyone who could help me understand what I was caught in. One of the experts warned me that the boundary between the living and the dead was fragile in certain places, and some spirits never rest. They said that sometimes dreams are a way the dead try to reach us, to warn or to pull us in. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was mounting. One night, the dream reached a terrifying climax. I was trapped in that shadow apartment, the figure closing in. It whispered secrets I couldn't understand, but the fear was overwhelming. Suddenly, a light burst through the darkness, a bright, warm light cutting through the shadows. I woke up to the smell of smoke. My smoke detector was blaring. The apartment smelled like something was burning. I rushed to the kitchen and found the toaster smoking. I had left a piece of bread in overnight, but in the corner of the kitchen I saw a shadow move. My breath caught. The temperature dropped again, and I heard the whisper, "Remember." The following day, I decided to perform a ritual I had read about in Eleanor's journal, a cleansing to seal the gateway and put the watchers to rest. It was a simple rite involving salt, candles, and spoken prayers. I was skeptical, but desperate. I set up the ritual in my apartment, lighting the candles and tracing the salt around the doors and windows. As I chanted the words, a cold wind blew through the room. The lights flickered, and I heard the tapping one last time. Then silence. The dreams stopped. The apartment felt lighter, warmer. The oppressive presence was gone. But I knew the watchers were still out there somewhere, waiting. Sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, I hear faint tapping on my door. I don't answer, I don't open, because some dreams aren't just dreams. They're warnings. And some doors should never be opened. Story. The end.
Story number 9.
It began with a dream, simple at first, like a shadow flickering just beyond the edge of sight, easily ignored. I was always a skeptic when it came to anything paranormal or supernatural. I believed dreams were merely the brain's random firing of neurons, a patchwork of memories, fears, and hopes woven during sleep. But the dream I had that night was different, vivid, and heavy, with an urgency I couldn't shake. And in the days that followed, I learned that sometimes dreams aren't just dreams. I was 28, living alone in a small apartment on the edge of a city where nothing much ever happened. My life was a predictable routine. Wake up, go to work at the hospital's administrative office, come home, eat dinner, watch TV, go to sleep. I never expected my subconscious to break into that routine with a warning so real it bled into my waking hours. The dream was simple. I was standing on a street corner, the intersection of Maple and 7th, just a few blocks from my apartment. It was late, the kind of late when the streetlights flicker and the wind hums through the cracks in the pavement. I saw a woman cross the street, carrying a red umbrella even though it wasn't raining. She was walking quickly, like she was running from something, but I didn't know what. As she passed a narrow alley, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. A man in a dark hoodie stepped out, blocking her path. I remember the sinking feeling in my stomach as I watched the woman freeze, eyes wide with fear. The man reached out, and I woke up before I could see what happened next. At first, I brushed it off. Just a nightmare, I told myself. I wasn't the type to get scared by dreams. But that morning, as I brewed my coffee, my phone buzzed with a notification. A news alert. I almost dropped the mug when I saw the headline, "Woman attacked at Maple and 7th intersection, police searching for suspect." The article described an assault near that very alley. The victim, a woman with a red umbrella, had been grabbed from behind and robbed. She escaped with minor injuries, but the attacker was still at large. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The details were too close to what I'd dreamed. The location, the umbrella, even the time of night. I felt a chill ripple down my spine. Coincidence? I wanted to believe it was just that. But something about the dream felt like a warning. Over the next few weeks, the dreams came again. Each time, a new scene played out in agonizing detail. A pedestrian slipping on wet pavement, a child left alone at a bus stop, a house fire in a quiet neighborhood. And each time, within days, I saw the headlines or heard the news reports. The dreams were no longer random nightmares. They were fragments of the future playing out in my sleep. One night, after a particularly vivid dream about a car accident, I woke up with a pounding headache and a deep sense of dread. The dream had shown a man in a blue jacket crossing a busy intersection. A truck ran the red light and struck him. The man's body flew through the air, landing hard on the asphalt. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was someone I knew. The next day at work, a man wearing a blue jacket came into the hospital lobby. He looked tired, carrying a briefcase and rubbing his temple as if nursing a headache. Something about him was familiar. That evening, I turned on the local news just in time to catch a report about a serious accident downtown. A pedestrian hit by a truck. The victim was a middle-aged man wearing a blue jacket. The description matched exactly. It was happening again. Dreams bleeding into reality. But why me? Why was I seeing these things? I couldn't ignore the patterns, and soon I found myself obsessively recording every dream, every detail, hoping to understand. I tried to warn people. Once I saw a dream where a young woman was about to be mugged in a park near my apartment. I went to the park the next day and saw a woman fitting the description sitting alone on a bench. I approached her, hesitated, then blurted out a warning. She laughed nervously and walked away. The very next morning, I heard on the radio that a woman had been mugged there the night before. That failure haunted me. I stopped telling people after that. One night, the dreams became more personal. I dreamed of my own apartment, the living room flooded with water, a leak from the ceiling turning the carpet into a soggy mess. The lights flickered, and I heard voices, faint and overlapping like whispers from another world. I saw myself standing in the middle of the room, soaked and confused as the water rose to my knees. I woke up with a start, soaked in sweat. I checked the ceiling, no leaks. The apartment was dry. Still, the dream left me unsettled. 3 days later, after returning home from work, I found water pooling under the bathroom door. A pipe had burst while I was gone, flooding the apartment. If I hadn't dreamed it, I wouldn't have noticed until it was too late. That was when I realized the dreams weren't just premonitions. They were messages, warnings about danger and disaster, but I was still powerless to stop what was coming. The nightmares intensified, each more vivid than the last. One night, I dreamt of a man in a black coat standing over a sleeping child in a hospital ward. The man's eyes were empty voids, and he whispered something I couldn't understand. The child stirred, gasped, and then the man vanished into the shadows. I woke up with a pounding heart and a tightness in my chest. At work the next day, a nurse told me about a child admitted overnight with severe respiratory distress. The details matched my dream. I was beginning to dread sleep. The strain began to show. I stopped eating regularly. My eyes grew dark with exhaustion. My coworkers noticed, but didn't say anything. How could I explain what was happening without sounding insane? I started avoiding sleep, drinking coffee late into the night, trying to stay awake just long enough to escape the dreams. But eventually, exhaustion caught me, and the visions returned. One night, I had a dream unlike any other. I was standing in a vast empty space, black as the deepest night. In front of me floated a glowing orb of light. The orb pulsed, shifting colors between white, blue, and red. Then, from the darkness, a figure appeared, tall, cloaked, face hidden. The figure pointed at the orb, and I realized it was showing me scenes from my own life, moments of joy, sorrow, and fear. Then the orb began to shatter like glass, fracturing into countless pieces that scattered into the darkness. The figure's voice echoed, "Time is breaking. The thread unravels." I woke up trembling. After that, the dreams stopped being simple warnings. They became puzzles, cryptic images and symbols I couldn't decipher. I researched everything, dream interpretation, psychic phenomena, even old folklore about prophecy and fate. But no answer made sense. No explanation was comforting. One day I met a woman named Claire at a coffee shop. She was a dream analyst, a professional who helped people understand their subconscious. I told her about my experiences, expecting skepticism. Instead, she listened quietly and said, "You're touching something rare. Some people call it precognition. Others say it's a curse. Either way, your dreams are bridging two worlds." Claire helped me develop a technique to control my dreams, lucid dreaming. She taught me to recognize when I was dreaming and change the course of the vision. The idea was to give me a chance to rewrite the future. I practiced every night. One dream stood out. I was back at Maple and 7th, the place where it all began. The woman with the red umbrella was there, but this time I stepped forward. I shouted a warning to her, and she turned, eyes wide but alert. The man in the hoodie approached, but I stood between them, fearless. He stopped. Then the dream shifted. The man removed his hoodie, revealing a face I recognized. It was me. I woke up in a cold sweat. That day, I avoided the news. The dreams kept coming, each one a mirror reflecting a different version of reality, some hopeful, others terrifying. I understood then that the future wasn't fixed. It was fluid, a web of possibilities shaped by choices and chance. But the burden of knowing weighed heavily. I sometimes wonder if it's a gift or a curse to glimpse what's coming, to live between the worlds of sleep and waking, forever haunted by what might be. And when I close my eyes at night, I still see the woman with the red umbrella, walking fast, always just out of reach. Story the end.
Story number 10.
The first time it happened, I thought it was just a coincidence. A strange, vivid dream that faded by morning like any other. But then the details started to bleed into my waking life, making me question everything I thought I knew about reality. I had recently moved into an old, slightly rundown apartment in a quiet neighborhood, trying to get a fresh start after a difficult breakup. The apartment was cheap and in a building that had clearly seen better days, with peeling paint and creaky floors. It had character, and it was close to my job, so I took it without hesitation. I wasn't the type to believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but sometimes late at night I felt a chill in the air that didn't seem natural. The first dream was simple. I was walking down a narrow, dimly lit hallway. The walls were a sickly pale yellow, cracked and stained with water damage. At the end of the hall was a door painted an eerie shade of green, half open, revealing total darkness behind it. I knew, without understanding why, that I was not supposed to go through that door, but curiosity pushed me forward, and I stepped through. Inside was a room with nothing but an old wooden chair in the center. It faced a large window that looked out onto a courtyard, but the view was obscured by thick fog. I sat down, and as soon as I did, the chair started to rock slowly on its own. I tried to stand, but I was frozen in place, paralyzed by a strange, creeping dread. Then the window cracked. The glass spider-webbed instantly, then shattered with a sound so sharp it jolted me awake. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, gasping for air. My bedroom was dark, quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. It was just a dream, I told myself. Nothing more. But when I reached over to turn on the bedside lamp, my fingers brushed against something cold and sharp. I pulled back my hand to find a small shard of glass resting on my blanket. How it got there, I had no idea. Over the next few days, the dreams became more frequent and more detailed. Every night, I was pulled back to the same hallway, the same green door. Each time I crossed the threshold, the room beyond changed subtly. Sometimes the chair was gone, replaced by a cracked mirror leaning against the wall. Other times the window showed different scenes, from endless fog to a blood-red sky. The dreams were so vivid that I began to question my own sanity. I started keeping a journal to write down everything I could remember, hoping to make sense of it all. Then one morning, the strangest thing happened. I woke up with a new bruise on my forearm, shaped roughly like a handprint. I was sure I hadn't hit anything during the night. No explanations made sense. I started telling close friends about the dreams and the bruises, but most just laughed or chalked it up to stress. One friend, Jenna, suggested I see a doctor, which I agreed to, more to make her happy than because I believed anything was wrong. The doctor ran tests, but everything came back normal. No allergies, no skin conditions, no evidence of physical trauma from sleepwalking or seizures. Frustrated and exhausted, I kept trying to ignore it. But the dreams didn't stop. One night, I dreamt I was standing outside the building where I lived, but it looked different. Older, with windows boarded up, a for sale sign faded and torn on the lawn. The street was empty, but the streetlights flickered like they were about to go out. Suddenly, I noticed something pinned to the door. A piece of paper with writing in shaky, almost childlike handwriting. The words were faint but unmistakable. "Help me." I tried to take the paper down in the dream, but my fingers passed right through it. I woke up in a cold sweat, and when I glanced at my phone, I noticed the time, 3:13 a.m. The next day, curiosity overpowered me. I walked to the building, scanning the facade carefully. It was exactly as it had appeared in my dream, older, neglected, and abandoned. The for sale sign was gone, but the boarded windows and peeling paint were exactly the same. I stepped closer to the front door and froze. Taped to the door was a small piece of yellowed paper, edges curled and stained. My hands trembled as I peeled it off and read the message scrawled in familiar handwriting, "Help me." I looked around quickly, half expecting to see someone watching me, but the street was deserted. From that moment on, the line between my dreams and waking life grew thinner. Each night, The dreams became more oppressive. I would wander through that hallway and the abandoned building that wasn't really there anymore, but was haunting my mind. One night, one night I dreamed I found a hidden staircase behind the green door in the hallway. It spiraled downward into pitch black darkness. With nothing else to lose, I climbed down. At the bottom was a small room filled with old photographs pinned to the walls. Most were black and white images of people I'd never seen before. Men and women with somber faces staring at the camera with hollow eyes. Then I saw her, a woman standing in the corner, pale and thin, with long dark hair covering half her face. She held a photograph in her hand, one of herself standing in front of the building. She looked up at me and whispered, "You're the only one who can find me." I woke with tears running down my face. Driven by a mixture of fear and determination, I started researching the building's history. I learned that decades ago, it had been a boarding house. There were stories of disappearances and unexplained tragedies. The woman in my dream was likely a former resident who vanished without a trace. One night, desperate for answers, I decided to explore the building at midnight. I took a flashlight and crept inside through a broken window. The inside smelled of damp and decay. Walls were covered in graffiti, floors littered with broken glass and debris. My footsteps echoed as I moved deeper, the beam of my flashlight catching glimpses of old furniture and shattered mirrors. Then I found the staircase from my dream, tucked behind a false wall. I hesitated, but went down. The room at the bottom was cold and dark, but as I shined my flashlight around, I spotted the photographs on the walls. I reached out to touch one, and suddenly, the air thickened, a cold breath brushed my neck. A voice whispered, "Thank you." I spun around, but no one was there. Heart racing, I fled the building and never went back. From that night, the dreams ceased. But sometimes when I'm lying awake at night, I catch a fleeting shadow at the edge of my vision, or hear a faint whisper that makes my skin crawl. I never found out who the woman was or what happened to her. But I know one thing for sure. Some dreams are more than just dreams. They're messages from places and people caught between worlds. And sometimes those messages cross over into our reality, whether we're ready or not. Story the end.
Story number 11.
It began as a vague unease, something subtle that crept beneath the surface of my thoughts in the days after my grandmother passed away. I was 27 then, living alone in a modest apartment on the edge of the city, trying to keep my life steady while grappling with grief I barely knew how to express. She had been my anchor in childhood, a source of stories and warmth. Losing her left a hollow I didn't know how to fill. A few nights after the funeral, I started having dreams. Not the usual kind. These were vivid, unsettling, and oddly detailed, like memories I'd never lived. The first dream was simple but disturbing. I was back in my grandmother's old house, the one she'd lived in for over 50 years before moving into assisted living. The house was almost exactly as I remembered, except the rooms were darker, colder. The wallpaper peeled in places I'd never noticed before, and the furniture seemed covered in a thick layer of dust, as though years had passed without anyone touching a thing. I wandered through the house in the dream, calling her name softly. The silence was heavy. When I reached her bedroom, the door was slightly open. I peeked inside and saw her sitting in the old rocking chair, facing away from me. She was humming a lullaby I hadn't heard since childhood. Her hair, once silver, was dark and tangled. I stepped forward to touch her shoulder, but before I could, she slowly turned her head to face me. Her eyes were black holes, endless and empty. I woke up screaming, heart pounding, the room drenched in sweat. The strange thing was, the next morning I found a faint, cold draft near my bedroom window. The curtains fluttered gently despite the fact that the window was closed. I dismissed it as a coincidence. Old apartments often have odd drafts. But the dreams continued, night after night. Each one a little more intense, a little more real. I saw the house's rooms change, shadows creeping along the walls. Sometimes my grandmother was there, sometimes not. There was a consistent figure, a dark silhouette standing in the hallway, watching me with those empty eyes. I never saw its face clearly, just the shape, and it always appeared at exactly 3:03 a.m. I started noticing things during the day, too. Small things. Objects moved slightly from where I left them. A faint scent of lavender, my grandmother's favorite, wafted through the apartment, though I hadn't brought any flowers inside. Sometimes I would catch a glimpse of a shadow out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned, no one was there. One night, I dreamed I was back at the house, but this time the floorboards creaked beneath me, and I heard whispers, unintelligible, like a language I couldn't understand. The dark figure was there again, closer this time. It reached out a hand, and I saw an old, worn, leather-bound book fall from its grasp, landing at my feet. I bent down to pick it up and opened it. The pages were filled with strange symbols and handwritten notes in a language I didn't know, but the margins were scribbled with my grandmother's handwriting. I could feel the weight of the book in my hands, the leathery texture beneath my fingers. Then the whispering grew louder, and the figure moved closer, its face still a void. I woke gasping for air. The next day, I decided to visit my grandmother's old house. It had been empty since she moved out 6 months before her death, locked up and untouched. I felt compelled, drawn there by the dreams and the unsettling feeling they stirred in me. The neighborhood had changed, but the house stood quiet, shadowed beneath overgrown trees. I found the key under the mat, just as she had always told me, in case you ever want to visit. I hesitated before unlocking the door. Inside, the house was just as I'd seen in my dreams. Dust coated every surface, and the air smelled of mildew and old paper. As I walked through the rooms, memories flooded back. The laughter, the stories, the warmth that once filled these walls. When I reached her bedroom, I saw the rocking chair, just like in the dream. I sat down, heart heavy. On the floor near the chair was a leather-bound book, old and worn. I picked it up carefully. The cover was cracked, but it was unmistakably the same book from my dream. I opened it, scanning the pages. The symbols were indecipherable, but the notes in the margins were in her handwriting. They spoke of dreams as windows, of a thin veil between the living and the dead. The book described rituals and warnings that some dreams were not mere figments of the subconscious, but messages from beyond, preludes to things that could seep into the waking world if ignored. That night, back in my apartment, I placed the book on my bedside table. At 3:03 a.m., I woke to the faint sound of humming, the same lullaby from my dream, and a cold presence at the foot of my bed. The dark silhouette stood there silently, watching. The dreams and waking visions intensified over the following days. Objects shifted more noticeably, voices whispered in empty rooms, and the figure appeared not just in dreams, but at the edges of my vision during the day. I felt trapped between two worlds, unable to find peace. I reached out to a local historian, someone who specialized in folklore and supernatural tales in our area. When I showed her the book, she grew visibly pale. She explained that the symbols were linked to an old belief in threshold spirits, entities said to guard the boundary between life and death. According to legend, those spirits could cross into the living world through dreams, especially when invited by unfinished business or strong emotional ties. She advised me to perform a cleansing ritual described in the book, meant to close the veil and banish the entity. I was skeptical, but desperate. On a quiet night, I followed the instructions carefully, lighting sage, reciting prayers in the strange language, burning the pages of the book after marking a protective symbol on my door. Afterward, the apartment felt lighter, the air warmer. That night, I slept deeply, undisturbed by dreams or shadows. For a time, it seemed the nightmare had ended. Then, one night a week later, I was jolted awake at exactly 3:03 a.m. The room was freezing cold, and the humming lullaby filled the silence. I opened my eyes and saw my grandmother sitting beside my bed, her face soft and kind, no longer shadowed or empty. She reached out and took my hand. "It's time," she whispered. The figure was gone. The dreams stopped after that night. But the boundary between dreams and reality had been altered forever in me. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still feel the thin veil brush against my skin, and I wonder how many others have felt that same crossing, where dreams bleed into waking life and the dead whisper secrets we are only beginning to understand. Story the end.
Story number 12.
The first time it happened, I thought it was just a coincidence. I had a dream about a fire in an apartment building across the street. In the dream, I saw flames licking the windows of the third floor, thick smoke billowing into the night sky. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding like a drum. When I looked out my bedroom window, the building was perfectly normal, dark and quiet. I told myself it was just a nightmare, an overactive imagination fueled by late-night news stories. But 2 nights later, the nightmare replayed itself with more intensity. This time, I could hear the crackling of the flames, the distant shouts of neighbors, the desperate cries of someone trapped inside. I tried to run to the building, but the streets seemed impossibly long and unfamiliar. When I woke up, my throat was dry and scratchy, and my hands trembled. The very next day, I was scrolling through my phone at work when a news alert popped up. A fire had broken out in an apartment complex exactly 2 blocks from my place. The fire started on the 3rd floor, and several residents were displaced. Miraculously, no one was seriously injured. My stomach twisted. I told my friends about the dream, expecting them to brush it off, but it shook me to my core. How could I have dreamed about something that hadn't happened yet? I started to have more dreams, each one more vivid and unsettling than the last. I saw a man in a dark coat standing at a bus stop, waiting in the rain, and the next day I overheard on the radio that a man had been mugged at that exact stop. I dreamt of a little girl lost in a crowded mall, crying out for her mother. Later that week, a report came in about a missing child who had been found safe, wandering alone. At first, I tried to ignore these dreams. I told myself it was just coincidence, or maybe my mind piecing together news stories subconsciously. But the pattern was too consistent. One night, I dreamed about myself walking down the street when I noticed a car parked oddly on the side. The driver's door was open, and inside, a small dog was trapped, barking frantically. I tried to help the dog, but before I could reach the car, the dog stopped barking and went silent. A sense of dread washed over me as I watched the scene. The next morning, a neighbor knocked on my door. She was distraught. The dog that belonged to an elderly couple down the block had been locked inside a car overnight and had died of heat exhaustion. My heart sank. The scene was exactly as I had dreamed. I began to keep a notebook next to my bed, writing down every detail I could remember from each dream. I didn't tell anyone about it anymore. It felt like a secret too heavy to share. Every dream was a puzzle piece, a window into the future I didn't want to see. Then the dreams started to change. They weren't just about strangers anymore. I began to see myself in them, but in strange situations I couldn't explain. In one dream, I was trapped in my apartment. The door was locked from the outside. I banged on the windows, screamed for help, but no one could hear me. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating me. I woke up gasping for air, my heart racing. I checked all the locks and windows. Everything was normal. Still, the fear lingered. Days later, I came home to find my front door ajar. Nothing was stolen, but the sense of violation was overwhelming. I called the police and reported it, but they found no signs of forced entry. It felt like a warning. The dreams grew darker. I saw shadows moving just beyond the edge of my vision, shapes that twisted and disappeared when I tried to look directly. I heard whispers in the silence, words I couldn't understand, but that filled me with unease. I started to dread going to sleep. It was no longer rest, but a gateway to things I didn't want to face. One night, I dreamed of a face, an old man with hollow eyes and a cracked smile. He reached out his hand, beckoning me to follow. I felt an icy chill crawl up my spine, but found myself walking toward him. The scene shifted suddenly, and I was standing at a train station. The old man was gone, but I saw a figure on the platform, myself, standing alone and watching as a train sped past without stopping. I woke up feeling empty and hollow. The next day, I found a flyer taped to a street lamp near my apartment. It was a missing persons notice, an elderly man fitting the description of the man in my dream. He had disappeared from a nursing home just days before. The flyer showed the same cracked smile. I couldn't deny what was happening anymore. My dreams were a bridge, somehow connecting me to moments that were yet to come, or perhaps moments that could be. I tried to talk to a psychologist. I wanted to understand if I was hallucinating or losing my grip on reality. But the moment I explained the dreams and their connection to real-life events, the doctor's eyes widened in a mixture of fascination and concern. Precognitive dreams, she said softly. It's rare, but some people experience them. Your mind might be picking up on subtle clues, or maybe it's something deeper, something you can't explain with science. She suggested meditation and grounding exercises, but the dreams continued. I felt like I was caught in a loop, a conduit for knowledge I hadn't asked for. One night, I had a dream so terrifying it felt like a warning scream. I was in my apartment, but it was dark except for the flickering light of a candle. The old man with the cracked smile was there again, standing by the window. Outside, I saw fire, real fire, engulfing buildings, lighting up the night sky like a warning beacon. I woke up gasping. I checked my phone. No news. But a creeping fear settled deep in my bones. 2 days later, a fire broke out in a nearby neighborhood. The reports showed dozens of buildings damaged and people displaced. It was the worst fire in the city in years. I knew it was the same one from my dream. I couldn't tell anyone the truth. Who would believe me? I was losing sleep, losing my mind. The dreams weren't just predictions anymore, they were messages. Sometimes warnings, sometimes cries for help from the future. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I realized the dreams weren't random. They were connected. The missing old man, the fires, the attacks. It was a chain of events I could see unraveling in my sleep. That night, I tried something different. When I went to sleep, I told myself to remember the dream, to try and change it if I could. When the old man appeared, I refused to follow him. I ran to the window and shouted at him to stop. The flames outside flickered, and I felt a sudden surge of energy. I woke up exhausted but hopeful. Over the next weeks, I learned to control the dreams better. Sometimes I could alter their course, save people, or prevent accidents. Other times, the future was too fixed, and I was helpless to change it. The burden was heavy. I couldn't escape it, couldn't turn it off. I realized the dreams were a responsibility, a terrifying gift. One night, I dreamed of myself standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into a stormy sea. The old man appeared again, and this time he whispered, "The future is a thread. Pull too hard, and it snaps." I woke up with tears on my face. I don't know where this will end or what comes next, but I've learned to listen to the dreams, to take them seriously. Sometimes reality is stranger and darker than anything your mind can imagine, and sometimes the nightmares you fear most are warnings you can't afford to ignore. Story the end.
Story number 13.
It was a subtle shift at first, like the kind of uneasy feeling you get when something small is off in your environment, but you can't quite put your finger on it. I was living alone in a modest apartment in a mid-sized city, working a regular job as an IT analyst. Nothing too exciting or dangerous. The rhythm of my days was steady, predictable, the kind of life where dreams usually didn't matter much. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The first strange moment came on a Sunday morning, when I woke from a dream so vivid I felt it linger in the edges of my mind as I opened my eyes. In the dream, I was walking down an unfamiliar street, a narrow lane lined with old brick buildings covered in ivy and moss. The street was deserted, the sky heavy with dark clouds that threatened rain, but never quite unleashed it. As I moved forward, I noticed a small cafe with a faded red awning on the corner. Through the rain-streaked window, I could see a figure sitting alone at a table. It was a man, middle-aged, wearing a beige trench coat and a hat pulled low over his eyes. Something about his posture unsettled me. He wasn't just sitting, he was waiting, watching. When I looked up at him, his face was completely blank, like a mask with no features. I woke up with a jolt, my heart pounding, and for a moment I thought I was still dreaming. It took a few seconds to realize I was in my small apartment, the morning light filtering through the curtains. I shook off the feeling and got out of bed. That afternoon, I was running an errand and decided to take a different route home. As I turned a corner, my breath caught in my throat. There it was, the street from my dream. Not an exact match, but almost identical. The old brick buildings, the overgrown ivy, the same narrow lane. At the corner stood the small cafe with its faded red awning, the paint peeling just like in the dream. I stopped in my tracks. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. I glanced through the cafe's window and my heart sank. Sitting alone at a table was the same man, beige trench coat, hat low, face featureless, expressionless. He didn't move. I blinked, and when I looked again, he was gone. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence, my brain filling in details from the dream to make sense of reality. But the sense of unease stuck with me. That night, the dream returned. The same street, the same gloomy sky. The man sat at the cafe again, but this time I noticed something new. In his hand, he held a small envelope. He looked directly at me and spoke, though no sound came out. His lips moved, but I only heard a voice inside my head. Find it before it's too late. I woke up gasping, heart racing. The clock read 3:14 a.m. I lay in bed, trying to catch my breath and calm my racing mind, but the words echoed endlessly. Over the next few days, the dreams repeated with small variations. Each time, the man had the envelope, and his message remained the same. The street never changed, but sometimes I noticed other details. A cracked lamppost, a faded sign for a bookstore, a stray cat crossing the cobblestones. Each element felt real, tangible. Meanwhile, in my waking life, I started noticing strange coincidences. A flyer on a bulletin board for a local antique shop that I'd never seen before. The shop's address matched a number on the street from my dreams. I felt drawn to it like a magnet pulling me closer. One rainy afternoon, I decided to visit the shop. It was tucked between two old buildings, dusty and dimly lit inside, filled with shelves cluttered with objects from forgotten times, tarnished silverware, cracked porcelain dolls, faded photographs. The shopkeeper was an elderly woman with piercing blue eyes and a knowing smile. I asked about the street in my dreams, describing the cafe and the man. She nodded slowly. "You're seeing things that others can't," she said softly. "That man, he's been waiting for someone to find what he lost." She led me to a small locked cabinet and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "This was found here many years ago, but no one knew who it belonged to. Maybe it's yours to open." I took the envelope with trembling hands. It was unmarked except for a faint symbol, an intricate circle with strange markings inside. Inside the envelope was a folded letter, written in neat, careful handwriting. The letter spoke of a secret hidden in the city, a relic buried beneath the old stone bridge near the river. The writer warned that whoever found the letter must protect the relic at all costs, for it held power that could alter reality itself. The letter ended with a plea: "Do not let the darkness claim it. Find it before he does." That night the dreams came back, more vivid and urgent. The man was there again, but now his face was twisted in rage, his voice thunderous in my mind. "You have the letter. The darkness will come." I woke up sweating, the letter clutched in my hand. The next day, I visited the stone bridge. It was an old structure worn by time and weather, spanning a quiet river that cut through the city. Beneath it, I found loose stones and soft earth, and after some digging, I uncovered a small metal box, rusted but intact. Inside was a strange artifact, a smooth black stone carved with the same symbol from the letter. As soon as I touched it, the air seemed to thicken, and I felt a cold presence behind me. Turning slowly, I saw the man from my dreams standing at the edge of the bridge. His eyes were hollow pits of darkness, and his coat billowed, despite the still air. He reached out a hand, and I felt a wave of despair wash over me. I clutched the stone tighter and ran. From that day on, my dreams blurred with reality. I saw the man everywhere, in crowds, reflected in windows, lurking at the edges of shadows. The street in my dreams no longer felt distant. It was part of my waking world, a warning of the thin veil between what we see and what lies just beyond. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still hear his voice whispering through the darkness, "Find it before it's too late." I don't know what happens if I don't, but I do know this. Some dreams are not just dreams, they're warnings, glimpses of a reality waiting to be uncovered, and once you see it, you can never look away. Story the end.
Story number 14.
The moment I moved into that old townhouse on West Elm Street, I felt something off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. It was an affordable place, nestled in a quiet neighborhood with towering oaks lining the street, and I thought it was the perfect spot to start fresh after a difficult breakup and a stressful job layoff. The house was quaint, but had that musty old house smell that lingered in the corners, like history had soaked into the walls and never left. I brushed off my unease as just the stress of the move and the residual anxiety I'd been carrying for months. The first night, I had a strange dream. I was standing in the living room of the townhouse, but it was darker, colder. The furniture was there, but faded and warped like an old photograph left out in the sun too long. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, and there was a persistent tapping sound coming from the window. I moved closer, peering out, but all I saw was an endless black void, as if the street outside had vanished. Then I noticed a figure standing just beyond the glass. It was a man, tall, wearing a coat that looked like it was from another era. His face was obscured by shadow, but his presence was unmistakable. The tapping continued, soft but insistent, like a warning. I reached out to the glass, and the cold seeped through my fingers. I woke up startled, heart racing, the sound of tapping still echoing faintly in my ears. I checked the window. It was closed, and the night outside was silent except for the usual rustling of leaves. I chalked it up to the usual residual nervousness after a big move. But then the dreams started happening every night, each one more vivid and terrifying. In one, the man was inside the house, pacing the hallways silently, watching. In another, I was outside, staring at the house from across the street, but the windows were all pitch black, like blind eyes, and the front door slowly creaked open by itself. After a week, the dreams began to seep into my waking hours. One morning, I found the front door unlocked, though I was certain I had locked it before going to bed. There was a faint trace of muddy footprints on the doorstep, leading inside. I live alone. No one else had keys. I cleaned it up but kept my phone nearby at night, hypervigilant. The tapping sound followed me into my waking life, too. Sometimes, late at night, I could hear a soft knock on the window. I convinced myself it was the branches hitting the glass or a stray animal, but the unease never left. Then came the shadow. At first, I glimpsed it in the corner of my eye, a dark silhouette standing just beyond the hallway or behind the curtain. Every time I looked directly, it was gone. My friends thought I was stressed and told me to relax, maybe see a doctor. I wasn't sure if it was stress, but the fear was real. One night, the dream changed again. The man with the obscured face stood at the foot of my bed, his coat brushing the floor. He didn't speak, but the tapping on the window grew louder and faster, like a frantic Morse code. I tried to move, but my body was frozen. The room chilled, breath visible in the air. He lifted a hand and pointed toward the bedroom door. When I forced my eyes to follow, the door slowly creaked open, revealing a black void beyond the frame, deeper than any ordinary darkness. Then the man whispered, a voice like gravel scraping stone, "You're running out of time." I bolted upright in bed, sweat pouring down my face, pulse thunderous in my ears. The bedroom door was closed, but I could swear I saw the edges tremble as if the darkness from the dream tried to seep into my room. I didn't sleep well after that. Over the next days, the tapping began to change pitch. It wasn't random anymore. It sounded deliberate, almost like it was trying to spell something. I started writing down the pattern. Tap, tap, pause, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. I had no idea what it meant. One night, I dreamt I was outside the house again, but this time, the street was empty and bathed in an eerie, unnatural fog. The man stepped from the shadows and handed me a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it and saw my name scrawled in a shaky hand, followed by an address I didn't recognize. I woke up clutching the dream like a lifeline. The next day, driven by curiosity and growing dread, I looked up the address online. It was an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town, marked as condemned for over 10 years. I debated whether to go, but something inside me compelled me forward. At dusk, I drove to the address. The house was surrounded by dead grass and cracked sidewalks, windows boarded up. As I stood on the porch, the wind whispered through broken panes, carrying a faint tapping sound, like fingernails drumming on wood. The front door creaked open as if inviting me in. I stepped inside carefully, flashlight cutting through the thick dust and cobwebs. The interior was ruined, paint peeling, furniture toppled and broken. I noticed scratches on the walls, deep gouges made recently. On a table, I found an old journal. Flipping through it, I realized it belonged to a man named Thomas Gray, who had lived there decades ago. The entries spoke of strange dreams, shadowy figures, and an ever-present tapping sound coming from the window. One entry chilled me. They come in dreams first, warning of what's to come. I can't escape the tapping, the black eyes watching me from the dark. I felt my hands go cold. Suddenly, the tapping started again, faster, louder, closer. I spun around to see a dark figure in the doorway, face obscured but eyes glowing faintly red. I dropped the journal and ran, heart pounding, not stopping until I was back in my car and driving away from that cursed place. The next night, the dream stopped. The tapping faded, the shadows receded. But sometimes in the quiet moments, I catch myself staring at the window, wondering if the dark figure waits outside, still tapping, still watching, still waiting for me to listen. Story the end.
Story number 15.
It started with a dream. At first, I didn't think much of it, just a strange, vivid nightmare. In the dream, I was standing at the edge of a quiet street I'd never seen before. The houses were old, with peeling paint and crooked fences. The sky was overcast, heavy with dark clouds that seemed to press down on everything below. I was drawn to one house in particular, a small, two-story with a red door, partially open as if inviting me in. I remember the cold seeping into my bones as I stepped toward the doorway. Inside, the house was empty, except for a single chair in the middle of the living room. Sitting in that chair was a man, hunched over, wearing a threadbare coat and a hat pulled low over his face. His hands rested on his knees, trembling slightly. "Who are you?" I asked, but he didn't answer. Instead, he slowly raised his head, revealing eyes so hollow and dark they seemed to swallow the light in the room. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding. It was just a dream, I told myself. A nightmare, nothing more. But the next morning, I noticed something strange. As I left my apartment, I passed a quiet street I'd never explored before. On a whim, I walked down it, and there it was, the same house from my dream, with the red door slightly ajar. The paint was chipped, the fence sagging exactly as I'd seen it. I stopped dead in my tracks. The street wasn't on any map I'd checked. I had lived in the city for years and never seen this part before. Yet, here it was. The house was real, and the red door was open. My heart thudded in my chest, and I debated whether to walk up and knock or just turn around. Curiosity won. I stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath my feet. Inside, the house smelled of damp wood and something else, an old, sour scent I couldn't place. The living room was empty except for a chair, just like in my dream. And sitting in that chair was a man, hunched over, his hat pulled low over his face. I swallowed hard. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't respond. Slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes were hollow, just like in my nightmare. I stumbled back and ran out of the house, heart hammering. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about that house. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? Instead, I started having more dreams. Each one was about the same street and the man in the chair, but the scenes changed. In one, the man whispered my name, beckoning me to come closer. In another, the house was on fire, flames licking the walls and smoke billowing into the sky. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. One night, I dreamed I was running down the street, away from the house, but something was chasing me, a shadow with glowing eyes. I could feel its breath on my neck, cold and foul. When I woke up, my sheets were tangled around me, and my heart was racing. The next day, I decided to research the street. I went to the local library and asked an elderly librarian about it. She looked puzzled. "That street? It's not on any current map. It used to exist years ago, but was wiped out in a fire decades back. The entire block was destroyed. No one's lived there since." I felt a chill. The house I saw was supposed to have been burned to the ground. I asked more questions. She showed me an old newspaper clipping. "Tragedy on Elm Street. Fire claims entire block." The date was almost 50 years ago. The man in the article's photo was the owner of the house with the red door. He died in the fire. That night, I dreamed of the fire again. Flames surrounded the house, and the man was trapped inside, banging on the windows, screaming for help. I tried to save him, but my arms passed through the smoke like mist. I woke up crying. From then on, the dreams became more intense. I saw the man more clearly, his face gaunt, eyes pleading. He wanted me to remember him, to tell his story. I felt like I was being pulled into the past, caught between two worlds. One night I dreamt that I was standing in the ashes of the burnt street. The man appeared beside me, and for the first time, he spoke. "Find the truth," he whispered, voice barely audible. "They hid it. The fire wasn't an accident." I woke up with his words echoing in my mind. Driven by a strange compulsion, I dug deeper into the fire's history. I found rumors of arson, of insurance fraud, but nothing concrete. The official report labeled it an accident, caused by faulty wiring. But something didn't add up. I talked to locals who'd lived in the city a long time. Some remembered the fire vaguely, others said the whole block had been cursed. A retired firefighter told me about strange calls the night of the fire, reports of men in masks setting fires around the neighborhood, but no arrests had ever been made. I started to connect the dots. The man in my dreams wasn't just a victim, he was a key to exposing a buried secret. One night, in a dream, the man handed me a small, charred box. Inside, I found papers, evidence of insurance fraud, of people who wanted the neighborhood gone. When I woke, I was clutching my pillow tightly, as if the box had been real. The next day, I found an old storage locker listed for auction near the burned block. I bought the key with trembling hands. Inside the locker were relics from the past, photographs, documents, and the charred remains of that small box. Among the papers was a confession letter from a man involved in setting the fire, detailing how they planned to collect the insurance money by burning down the block. I handed the documents to the police. Weeks later, the city acknowledged the truth. The fire had been a crime covered up for decades. After the revelation, the dreams stopped. The man in the chair was gone, but I never forgot that street, the red door, and the hollow eyes that haunted me. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see the flames flickering and hear the whispers urging me to remember. Story, the end.